Welcome to Fiscal Note Training. This is Susie Lindsay with the Legislative Fiscal Division. Today we'll be talking about what fiscal notes are, who produces fiscal notes, how you can read a fiscal note, and how, if your bill gets assigned a fiscal note, how you might change that if you are unhappy with the results. What's the purpose of a fiscal note? Well, it's simply a report on the financial impacts of a bill. A fiscal note is prepared by the Governor's Office of Budget and Program Planning with the help of all of the state agencies. So if a bill impacts a state agency's budget, for example, that state agency will develop a fiscal impact statements and provide those to the Governor's Office of Budget and Program Planning, and they will compile those into the fiscal note that is ultimately published. Fiscal notes are required on all bills reported out of a committee that will impact revenues or expenditures of the state or county governments or municipalities. The Governor's Office of Budget and Program Planning again compiles those fiscal notes using the state agencies to help them, and they will explain and defend assumptions and calculations to legislators and the public for these fiscal notes. They will send the completed fiscal notes to legislative leadership for sign-off, and they will on occasion change fiscal notes if it's warranted. The legislative presiding officer of each chamber may request a fiscal note on bills as needed. That presiding officer may also request a fiscal analysis from the legislative fiscal analyst in the Legislative Fiscal Division. And although rare, the legislative fiscal analyst may determine if the fiscal analysis merits changing either the values reflected on the general fund status sheet or on a more in-depth analysis of the fiscal note. So this next couple of slides shows you how to read a fiscal note. This particular fiscal note is an actual one from the 2021 legislative session. And as it says in the short title, it is to revise business equipment tax laws. And this fiscal note explains in a fiscal summary on the front page the impacts from the bill on fiscal impacts in dollars, as well as a short description of the fiscal impact in words. The first page is always the best short synopsis of how the bill is fiscally impacted. This particular bill amended property taxes, particularly Class 8 business equipment property tax. It proposed increasing the current market value exemption from $100,000 to $300,000. And then it also reimbursed local government jurisdictions for this reduction, and they did that through entitlement share transfers. County entitlement share transfers are statutorily appropriated in statute currently, and those payments were made as through a transfer. In addition, the fiscal impact on this bill impacted the guaranteed tax-based aid, which is a payment to schools from the state general fund. This is a short synopsis, but the following pages go into more detail. As you can see on the first page underneath the summary, you can see the Department of Revenue begins its assumptions. This bill impacted both the Department of Revenue and the Office of Public Instruction. The Department of Revenue explains on the second page how Class 8 property taxes are collected and which funds are impacted by this bill. The state general fund is impacted, the Montana University System payments, the county payments to local governments, city local government payments, K-12 school guaranteed base aid payments, and the tax increment finance district payments. Down the page, you'll see the Office of Public Instruction and the impacts on that. The final page shows you, in a nutshell, the transfers to each of those entities that we talked about and the overall total revenue cost and total expenditure cost of the bill. The local assistance GTV, that's in parentheses OPI, is the guaranteed tax-based payments that are reimbursed through an increase in those payments through this bill. And the transfers to counties, cities, and tax increment finance districts are all entitlement share payments that are statutorily appropriated to those entities. And then finally, the transfers to the Montana University System, in which the Department of Administration administers. That's in a nutshell how you can read a fiscal note. There's always more information, not always, but usually more information at the very end on effect on counties or other local revenues and any technical notes. If the bill technically might need a little tweak to get it completely the way the Office of Budget and Program Planning feels the bill should be written. Then at the very end, the budget director for the governor will sign off on the fiscal note, and it will be sent to legislative leadership. The sponsor gets a chance to sign off on the fiscal note, but in this case, this is the third version of the fiscal note on this bill, and although the sponsor signed other versions, this sponsor is not signed on the third version here. The Legislative Fiscal Division does have a role with fiscal notes, and their role is to simply review all of the fiscal notes and collect all of the data into a database and explain any fiscal notes to the sponsors or other legislators. And then the Legislative Fiscal Division will compile all of the fiscal notes into that database, and financial leadership of the legislature will use that data to help build the budget. The Legislative Fiscal Division will work with the sponsor and the bill drafter through any technical issues that are causing a fiscal impact, and they may be a liaison between the legislator and the Office of Budget and Program Planning if a legislator so chooses. On very rare occasions, the Legislative Fiscal Division will calculate an alternative analysis requested by any legislator as time allows. And once in a while, they will respond to leadership of all four caucuses on a request for fiscal analysis of bills. This is a very rare occasion, and fiscal analysis is usually, of this type, is usually limited to an impact to the state general fund of that bill. If the bill doesn't impact the state general fund, it's usually not a request. So what if your bill gets a fiscal note that you don't agree with? What can you do? You have some choices, but when you don't agree, but you will have to hurry because you only have 24 hours in which to make any changes. First would be to talk to the Office of Budget and Program Planning when you want to understand the impacts of the fiscal note better, or when you want their opinion to fix that fiscal note. If you're still unsure and you want to talk to someone on your staff, the Legislative Fiscal Division is always here to talk through a fiscal note and help you understand what next steps you have, or when you want an alternative assumption calculated. You can always write your own fiscal note. and you can always not sign on the line on the back page under sponsors. If you don't sign, at times you're sending a message that you disagree. And finally, you can ask legislative leadership for a fiscal analysis. When a fiscal note assumptions are significantly incorrect and Office of Budget and Program Planning will not change them, or when they're material enough to impact the general fund status sheet. Your sponsor rebuttals form can be picked up in the same location as to where you pick up your bills, and you can fill that out either on your own, or if you would like staff help, the legislative staff is always willing to help you fill this out. If you have questions, I'm down in the Legislative Fiscal Division, and again, my name is Susie Lindsay. Thank you.